Thank you. It's great to be here. That was intense. So my presentation is a little bit lighter. So I wanted to start off by just saying my husband says that I'm never satisfied. And yes, I'm going to get personal, but not that personal. So when he first said that, I got a bit defensive. I thought, what do you mean? What do you mean? But then, of course, thought about it, and it's true. I think, I'm guessing, like many of you in this room, not satisfied. I don't want to be satisfied. I'm always looking for that next thing, that new way of doing things. So it also caused me to sort of reflect back on the choices that I've made in my career over the years, and I'll just give you a quick overview. About 15 years ago, yes, I just turned 39 for the first time last month, and about 15 years ago I finished my MBA. And I was fortunate because I did have a couple of opportunities to go the corporate track. A couple of financial institutions had given me some great offers with some nice money attached to them. And as a student with student loans, that was appealing. But one day, as I was sort of waiting to make my decision and thinking about it, the phone rang. And it was a friend of mine. And they were calling to tell me that another friend of ours had been killed in a car accident. He was 25. And he truly was the type of guy who lived life to the fullest. And as you probably can guess, that was a pretty pivotal moment for me. It really did make me reflect on, what am I doing? The corporate track, that was never my intention. I don't want to do that. And it made me make a major shift. So I did like any 20-something would do. I moved back home. I opted out of the corporate track, and I broke off a long-term relationship. And then I was like, what am I going to do now? This is a major shift. I now have nothing. But part of me, because I'm never satisfied, that was okay. I felt that was okay. So about a week later, I went and knocked on the door of a small entrepreneurial business here in town and said, hey, I'm going to volunteer for you. Let me help you out with this project. They took me under their wing. It was a husband and wife couple. And they took me under their wing and brought me into their very entrepreneurial environment and let me get my hands really dirty. Let me try all sorts of different things. Yes, of course, I was bringing coffee. But I also was meeting with some really amazing, inspiring, interesting people. And within that first week, I'd proven myself, and they hired me full-time. So it was a risk, but it worked out for me at that point. So I learned a lot in those 2 years working with them. And then I started to get that feeling that I was getting a bit too comfortable, a bit too satisfied, which I don't like. So I knew I needed to make a shift. So I started dating this guy, and we'd only been dating about a month, I think, at this point, but we did know each other before. And he said, hey, I have a job opportunity in Toronto. Do you want to move? And because I was feeling uncomfortable with being almost satisfied, I said, sure. But I'm not going to move until I have my own job, so I have my own comfort. And I had done my undergrad in Ontario, so I had a number of friends in Toronto. So I had a bit of a safety net. So a couple months later, I got my own job there, and I moved to Toronto, and of course we moved in together right away. And I started working with this other woman entrepreneur. I got connected with her through a variety of different channels, and she was doing these amazing events across the country, bringing together women leaders and having them share their stories in a very interactive, inspiring format. So I got to travel across the country and meet all of these amazing people, but in a very small entrepreneurial environment again. So yes, I was schlepping boxes, but I was also lunching with these very influential, powerful people across the country. I was hooked on this entrepreneurial edge. So about a year after doing that feeling was coming back again, that craving, that yearning for more. So I reconnected with my previous mentors who had taken me under their wing, my first job after MBA, and we decided to start a business. It was the perfect scenario for me. I was 27, I was in Toronto, they were in Vancouver, so I had that autonomy and that ability to grow my own thing, but also that safety net. So we started to grow a business called Frontline Staff. It was a temporary staffing business, so providing temp staff for conferences and special events across the country. We grew that to about 4 cities in the first year. Incredible learning. I had no idea what I was doing. That's part of being an entrepreneur and part of not knowing what's next. And I do thrive on that. So but then about a year into that, we launched it in early 2001. We all know what happened, what major world event happened in September of that year. impacted all of us in obviously a variety of ways. And for a small business owner, it had a major shift for us as well. So we had to make some decisions. And I was getting that comfortable feeling again, even though we had to make some changes, and I decided to buy them out. So I went on my own and rejigged the company and continued to grow it. 2 years after that, in 2003, a company came knocking. It was a Vancouver-based company, still in Toronto at this point, but servicing 8 cities across the country. I was traveling a ton. I had about 600 temporary staff, and the HR challenges were immense. The payroll challenges were even more immense. And so when I had the opportunity to sell my business, they wanted to buy my business, I thought, it's not quite ready, I'm not quite ready. But personally, a few things had shifted for me as well. I had gotten married in the meantime, fortunately to the same guy I did move to Toronto with. That all worked out. And I moved back to Vancouver, sold my business to this company, and we had the opportunity to move back to Vancouver. I was turning 30 that year, and something else was happening as well, that different craving, that different need, and I knew I wanted to start a family. And I knew I wanted to be back in this amazing city of ours. So I came back to Vancouver and went to work for the company that had bought mine. It was a different experience, but it was an entrepreneurial environment. It was 3 great guys who were partners, and it was a much larger company than mine, and another learning experience. But within that first year, I did have a child, my first daughter, just to add another layer. And then I went back to work for them just a couple months after my first daughter was born. 2 years later, my second daughter was my second daughter, I only have 2. And I knew I was done. I knew that part of my life was done and that I was ready to move on from that particular role. So I'm at home with a 2-month-old, a 2-year-old, and what of course I'm going to do? I'm going to start another business, because why not? I started a small hobby business. As Erin mentioned, it was called Momcafe Network, and it was really about bringing professionally minded women together, those who are educated, had high-level careers, and were having a family, and were trying to figure out how to do it all. There's no right answer. There won't be for quite some time, but it was just about bringing people together and sharing stories and opportunities. At that same time as I was about to launch that business, this incredible opportunity at the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs came up. It's a nonprofit organization, so close to my heart, mentoring, inspiring, and educating women entrepreneurs, and helping them to grow their businesses. It was a new role, so that interested me, but it was a nonprofit organization reporting to a board of directors. A little bit scary. But I went for it. So and because there was flexibility and because the environment was what I needed it to be. And so I was able to continue to grow my business and my family and have this role. I did that for 4 years. And then I started to get that feeling again, that this is slowly, whether it's a feeling of comfort, and I'm sure many of you can relate, or something, this craving for more. So I sold my business a year ago. We're now up to a year ago. And I thought, great, I have one job now. Like, who here actually wears one hat? And I'm guessing not many of you, you're being shy. But whether it's you're active in the community or you have a couple of different roles, whatever it is. But I thought, okay, I'm gonna have one real job and I'm gonna be able to do all these other things. And I was so excited about that. And I did that for the last year as CEO of FWE. But then earlier this year, that feeling came back, and I didn't have that same creative outlet that I'd had as a true entrepreneur. And I was working with all of these incredible people who inspired me every day with this great energy. And I thought, I want a piece of that again. I love supporting them, but I also want to be part of that. So I made a difficult decision earlier this year and decided to leave a role that I really loved, because it was time. It was time for me to move on. It was time for me to continue to challenge myself and develop myself personally. But also it had been a pretty intense 5 years. It had been quite busy. And I know that I thrive on that, but I realized that this time I'd had all of these shifts that I actually needed a bigger pause. So I left my role at the end of May, and for the last 3 months, I've been having a fantastic summer. This weather has been amazing. Just completely enjoying time with my family, and of course, keeping somewhat busy. I'm still on a number of boards and doing some community work, but I'm now taking some time to really reflect on what's next, and that really excites me. I know it doesn't excite everyone, but what it's also made me realize is that throughout my career, I've had these jigs and jags for different reasons, and I've unconsciously done that. But when I look at the next generation, there's actually a lot of conscious moves towards creating different paths and not staying in the same role for long. I've also had a realization, obviously, that satisfaction, to not have that is okay. I'm not looking for contentment. What I am looking for is fulfillment, and I think that's a very different thing. But I also realized that how we're working, it's not really working right now. You look at the numbers, employee retention is decreasing, employee engagement obviously is also decreasing. A number I love, the number of entrepreneurs is actually increasing because I think the traditional work environment is not working. The economy is still in a mess and it's not going to change anytime soon, I don't think. So it's time, and the work-life balance thing, whatever, we have to create our own. So I think that looking at that, I think there's a number of things that we can do. I think it's up to us to make some changes and to shift how we think about how we work. I think and because we're also overstimulated, we have so many options, so many choices, and we're working at such a high intensity pace all the time. And that's okay, but I think we need to give ourselves the opportunity to make a shift, to make a change, or to take a pause. So I think as employers, and even as entrepreneurs employing people, we have to start to think about how can we give people or create policies to allow people to take some time off if they need it, when they need it, and it could look in so many different ways. So it could be a month in your 20s to go travel to Europe. It could be in your 30s and 40s you need some time off to raise a family or to travel. Or it could be, and it's not an age and stage issue at all. We all have different needs and challenges at different times in our lives. It's more about shifting how we think, big picture. Our lifetimes are extending, as we all know, too. So we actually have more time to do a lot of the things that we want to do and to build in some different breaks and pauses. So there's a couple of examples of some neat things that some progressive employers are doing. I learned recently that KPMG, as we know, is one of the large accounting firms. They actually have a mandatory sabbatical for their senior partners. I thought that was pretty interesting. But the word that caught me there was mandatory. Because so often we're our own worst enemy, and we don't give ourselves permission to take that time or to make that shift, whatever that is. I was talking to another woman earlier this week. She works for a large financial institution. And within her team, most people average 2 to 4 weeks of holiday. But their policy is that I have to take 5 consecutive days off in a row, at least once a year. Small thing, but makes a big difference. And maternity and paternity leaves, those aren't going anywhere. So why don't we just start to plan for these things? And whether it's every year, every 2 years, whatever it is, start to build those in. As employees, we also have a responsibility to make some choices and to ask. If we are employed, go to your manager, go to your supervisor, and ask, but ask in a very constructive, respectful, and most importantly, solutions-based way. Ask and tell how you're going to make this happen. I had quite a small team at FWE, and a team of 4. And one of my employees came up to me, and she wanted to take a month off to go to China one year. She approached me in January. We talked about it. And at first, of course, I was like, how are we going to do this? You're 25% of my team. But she came to me with a plan, and we made it happen. And for the last 3 years, she's been able to take that off. So little things make a big difference. So I think that we just have to embrace this new way of thinking. Look at, there is a pattern starting to evolve, and we just need to understand that we do need to take these pauses, these breaks, these shifts, and you have the choice. So it's your turn. And if you may, like me, choose to not be satisfied. Thank you.